They call these people the 5%. 5% of your society are going to be the ones that want to fight. Whether they're mentally deranged, doped up, or just have a hard attitude about them, they're going to fight. And the trick in SWAT is being able to not only set up and deal with these guys, but also to train for them. We used to train for the mom and pop stuff. We got really, really good at the mom and pop stuff. It was the guys that wanted to fight that we needed to train for. So that your training has to then escalate to deal with that.
We knew from the narcotics officers that they were armed inside, that they had a guy at the front window overlooking the front of the property, etc., and they were armed. As we attempted to breach the front door, gunfire rang out from inside, automatic weapons fire. We returned fire. One suspect was killed as a result of that fire, and we surrounded it and we gassed it and went in and recovered the other. It was a hell of a firefight. Terry Cahill went down in the field of fire, and Joe Chatham, one of the members of his team, instinctively knelt down and covered Terry Cahill. You don't train that. That comes from the heart.
Two things are extremely contagious under stress. One of them is panic, and the other one's composure. Scott called for suppression fire on the Alpha 3 window, which is the window right next to the front door. Executed that, went up, evac'd Terry, and Joe Chatham did a phenomenal job. He did. Had it not been for Scott knocking down the threat and evac'ing Terry, it could have been a lot uglier.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. This law enforcement acronym has been long romanticized, adored, despised, praised, and scrutinized in the United States as well as the world. The acronym has been a staple in TV and Hollywood, as the world knew the names of Hondo and Deacon, as well as that iconic SWAT theme song. It has been the pinnacle of operational policing since the 1960s, conceived as an urban counterinsurgency bulwark. From the time the first brick was thrown and the first fire was lit in the 1965 neighborhood of Watts, to Charles Whitman climbing to the 28th floor of the University of Texas Tower, to the 1969 LAPD and Black Panther shootout, to the events of the 1977 White Rock riot. It is very clear the need for a rapid response, heavily armed and uniquely trained team is needed. The Dallas Police Department, with our iconic patch and moniker of Dallas's finest, is also rich in history. High-profile shootings, assassination, riots, mass shootings, and also a standard for policing, as we have our very own Dallas SWAT. And here to tell the story are some of the warriors who lived it and are living it. Some of the old guards as well as the new guardians of the city. Today we are joined by four very special guest co-hosts. It is my great honor to welcome on Scott McDonald, nicknamed the Commander, and for good reason. Hiring on DPD in 1968 and spending 27 years on Dallas SWAT as both a troop and a sergeant. His leadership skills and reputation are legendary. Steve Claggett spent 15 years on Dallas SWAT, and as Misty put it, was part of a core cadre that helped mold Dallas SWAT. His focus and passion for training stemmed from real-life tragedy of the Dallas Police Department. His reputation walks into the room before he does. We're having a roundtable, not just from some of the OGs of Dallas SWAT, but also current active members who have seen shifts in tactics, weaponry, as well as public perception. I'd like to welcome on one of our own, Danny Canetti. Danny has been with DPD for 16 years, 8 on Dallas SWAT, master breacher certification, explosive breacher for the team for several years, sniper and less lethal. Danny was also a key figure in the 2015 attack on police headquarters, as well as engaging with the shooter on 7/7/2016. He's a rope master and rappel instructor for high angle team, and along with rappel instructor for TTPOA, bringing 26 years of rock climbing experience for the most advanced rope and rappel program for SWAT in the state. Lastly, we have Matt Smith. Matt Smith has been with DPD for 22 years and a member of Dallas SWAT for 17. Matt, a squad leader, has been an instructor for basic and advanced SWAT, hostage rescue, and hazardous warrant entry, to name a few. Matt Smith is an exceptional and dedicated member of SWAT that strives to make his teammates better, safer, and to protect the citizens of Dallas. He is a true professional. Guys, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and doing this program. I've had this idea for history lesson and SWAT in general for the whole country, and specifically Dallas SWAT, because Dallas SWAT is so rich in history. We have Steve Claggett back here. You've already heard of his story. You got Matt Smith. He was on the Dynamic Warrant episode. Danny Canetti's always here. He literally has had his hands on every single episode, cleaning this shit up to make it sound good. He's probably going to take out that shit. There's a person here that you've only heard of by nickname in a few episodes. He's been called the Commander probably the majority of his career. He spent 24 years in SWAT. He hired on in 1968. He's been an operator as well as a supervisor in Dallas SWAT. He's seen it all. He's seen the evolution of SWAT from early on, the decades changed. Nobody's heard his real name other than just his nickname. Scott McDonald, thank you for being here and being a part of this. I can't think of somebody, a more important figure, that can be here to explain this history.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Your son texted me and told me to say all that nice things about you.
I'll get even.
All right. Dallas SWAT, it's looked at as one of the most prestigious SWAT units in the country, I believe. We're going to do like a little history of SWAT starting in 1965 in L.A. The Watch Riots, August 11th, 1965, the Watch Riots hit. We've had the 1966 UT Austin tower shooting with Whitman climbing those towers. We've had LAPD and Black Panther shootout. We've had the May 17, 1974 LAPD shootout. That dealt with Patty Hearst and those radicals. There's always been a need for a rapid rescue response unit that's heavily armed and heavily trained and uniquely trained. And you guys have actually watched that evolution. We have 2 retirees here and we have 2 active SWAT members here. And all working in different eras. And they've seen the advancement in weaponry, tactics, and technology. Technology is starting to become more key. We're going to get into that. So I want to get into your retirees that were the foundation for Dallas SWAT, and y'all helped mold training tactics early on that have continued and are still being used to this day. In 65 on the Watch Riots, L.A. was nearly burnt down. Inspector Daryl Gates, he had the idea to form a unit for counterinsurgency, for urban counterinsurgency. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can y'all talk about that? What y'all know about that?
Yeah, in fact, Scott and I had the pleasure of listening to Chief Gates at a conference that we were attending, or a competition we were attending, and it was phenomenal. The guy was a true leader and a true fire breather. Every rank he was in, he brought the best out of people. Extremely progressive. Of course, he made a lot of enemies doing that too, which shocking how that happens. But he first implemented SWAT there in L.A. After the Watts riots. They of course, there are two notable shootings they had after that was the Black Panther shootout and the SLA shootout. The thing that I think was most concerning to Gates and the team is that they really weren't prepared for that either. It just turned out to be a bunch of guys with rifles and pistols and shotguns shooting out with knuckleheads inside a building. So they started getting a lot more progressive the way they did their business. Basically throw bodies and throw ammo at it. That was the kind of the philosophy back then. We'll outlast them. On the SLA shootout, they tried to implement hot gas in there, which was pretty much the standard back then, and ended up burning the place down. That was a good learning point because it was basically a kidnapping of Patty Hearst, who was her dad was a media mogul in L.A.
Yeah.
And when they kidnapped her, she was not at the location, but had she been there, obviously she would have been involved in the fire too, and been killed that way. But so they again started tweaking their tactics and learned to be a little more surgical and things like that because of the collateral damage. But they took black eyes over that, which is just it's reprehensible. But the media was against them on that, saying they were too heavy-handed. You see a lot of experts later on that were throwing in their 2 cents, and still today do on different things. They, just to take a side step on this, David Klinger, who was an LAPD cop during this time, and he ended up going and getting his PhD in criminal justice. And now he's teaching, I think even still today, at University of Missouri in St. Louis. And him and his partner did a study on SWAT and the benefits of SWAT, the challenges of SWAT, things like that. And he found out through surveys and just their own empirical data that they anytime SWAT gets called out, you can be guaranteed two things. One is the rounds aren't going to be nearly as heavy as what they would be in a normal patrol operation. They return fire less than what they do just because of the armor and things that they bring to the table, and they usually get compliance through means other than lethal force, whether it's just the presence tearing stuff off in the house, exposing suspects, or the introduction of chemical agents in there and things like that. They will bring the suspects to them. So basically, final option is going inside. That's considered the final option in SWAT. The standard that's been there for the last couple decades at least, and so that heavy-handed reputation that SWAT has had for a lot of years couldn't be any farther from the truth.
Well, to this day, the media is still held, and Matt, you and Danny both see firsthand how the media and some public perception, they want us, they need us, but as soon as something looks somewhat aggressive on a camera, it can be spun, and it is spun in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about that just with the dynamic warrants.
Yeah.
And the no-knock versus surrounding call-out and all the advantages and disadvantages. The appearance of things, that is the way that's been cast in light with the media now is it couldn't be more wrong. But, history shows, and this is what Steve's alluding to, is the numbers show that, when we're doing it and doing it the way we need to, everybody's safer, not just the officers, but the suspects as well.
Well, the numbers you brought in for your episode on the dynamic warrants are just phenomenal. I mean, it's the numbers don't lie,
right?
And when you are called to a scene, it's not a pretty situation, right? And it's a serious situation.
Well, on the SWAT, when you're called out, it's already met that threshold of resistance because that's why you're there. And when we're called in to handle a situation because it's gotten past the scope of your normal patrol officers or whatever, whether it be policy or just the right thing to do, it's already gone bad. So we have to bring a calm to the situation from the time we get there, and that's usually what we do. And what Steve's alluding to, you have a show of force, You surround it, and now they know they're not escaping. So they can surrender, be the easiest way for everybody, or they can continue to fight back, and we have options for that. And if they want to go that way, we can do that. That's the reason why we're there, is because people talk about special weapons, but it's tactics. The tactics is what saves everybody, and that's what a lot of people miss. That they see the gear and the guns and all that gear, and that's easy because it's the optics of it. But the tactics is what they don't understand. That's what really saves the day.
Well, we always want to be a level higher of force than what the suspect or what the aggressor has, right? And when you show up, they're not going to have more weaponry than you, right? They're not going to have more armor than you, and you're there for a reason to show a force. And also, when people see a show of force, a lot of times they back down. Yeah. They're not going to sit and fight. Oh shit! I'm outgunned here. I'm not gonna fight this one. I'm not gonna win this one.
That's how you win.
Yeah, of course.
There are exceptions to that.
There are
the hardcore who don't really care about the odds or the image. They're willing to stand there and fight it out with you.
Well, those are the outliers too, but those need to be dealt with accordingly as well, right? They buy tickets to these events too, right? Yeah. So they got to deal with the outcome, and
they call these people the 5%.
Yep,
5% of your society are going to be the ones that want to fight, whether they're mentally deranged, doped up, or just have a hard attitude about them. They're going to fight, and the trick in SWAT is being able to not only set up and deal with these guys, but also to train for them. Because the old saying we had back when Scott and I were on the team, was it yesterday? Is basically we used to train for the mom and pop stuff. We got really, really good at the mom and pop stuff. It was the guys that wanted to fight that we needed to train for. So that your training has to then escalate to deal with that. So teams get pretty comfortable in what they do because it's always worked up to now. That mentality, which drives me crazy. I think we've said this before.
The way we've always done it. Mentality.
Yeah. And I think that is the trick from a team environment, from a training environment, is to always look for that next level. Look what we did. We could have done better in the last warrant, the last BP, the last hostage gig, and then figure out what we can do to make it better in training. So it's multifaceted. Just being able to step over those hurdles and gear things in a smart direction. But one of the things that we failed at, in my opinion, when we were young, in our infancy stages when I was there, is that we used to do written after actions. After every hit, whether it was a warrant or a barricade, we used to do after actions. And guys would write down their opinions. Most of them turned out to be BJ sessions where, good stuff. You did great, Sarge, this kind of stuff. And some guys would get pretty specific and go, yeah, we could have done this better. How about this? How about this? How about this? And there was one sergeant in particular that he didn't like it, made him look bad. So he would come up and challenge guys if they wrote something in there that was contrary to, oh, you were great. You should be wearing a cape. And if it was contrary to that, he'd get red-assed over it. And so because of that, it went away, and we no longer did it. So,
in light of what Steve just alluded to, the incident on Arizona, 3010 Arizona, that was an exercise in stupidity because all of the things that Steve just mentioned about incorrect behavior, poor performance, all came to light at that incident.
Can you describe that incident? What happened, so the listener would know what happened on that?
We were tasked with another squad to hit a house at 3010 Arizona, and this is in March of '93.
Okay,
right after the Waco incident. So the Camp Davidian raid at Waco.
Yep.
So all of the media coverage for days on end regarding the Waco incident led right up to this warrant that we ran at 3010 Arizona. We knew from the narcotics officers that they were armed inside, that they had a guy at the front window overlooking the front of the property, et cetera, and they were armed. So we went in there to hit it and got up to the front door, and as we attempted to David Brown's squad was primary, and we were secondary. As we attempted to breach the front door, gunfire rang out from inside, automatic weapons fire.
From the front window?
From the front window, immediately to the right of the entry point, the front door. At that point in time, we had a standing rule: once the threshold is breached, we push on. We would not stop and leave some members of the team inside and some out. So once the threshold was breached and entry was executed, everybody went. But that shooting, we came under fire before penetrating the threshold. So David Brown's squad pulled back, and we returned fire. One suspect was killed as a result of that fire, and we surrounded it and we gassed it and went in and recovered the other. Reflecting back on the Waco incident, the Camp Davidian thing, and all the coverage of that, one has to ask, why would teenagers choose to take on a highly trained, highly equipped, outgunned group of people? Why would you take them on in a gunfight? And that has always boggled my mind, and I think it was because of all of the coverage from Waco that they saw the officers retreating and dragging their wounded away and this, that, and the other, encouraged these kids, teenagers, to take on SWAT. And it was a hell of a firefight. Terry Cahill went down in the field of fire, and Joe Chatham, one of the members of his team, instinctively knelt down while the rest of his squad sought cover. Knelt down and covered Terry Cahill. In my opinion, Joe Chatham was probably the only one who deserved a medal out of that. You don't train that. That comes from the heart, and he instinctively did that. But because of the politics that we have all witnessed, there were people who got medals, medals out of that had no business getting a medal out of that. Joe Chatham, in my opinion, was the only hero there. So
okay, Scott, I'm going to cut in.
But what went wrong in that? The tactics, our tactics. We aborted the entry as trained, and you guys just experienced one of these, didn't you? But y'all had already threatened. Breached the threshold.
Yeah, so the other week we had gone to serve a warrant, and using the tactics we do, it wasn't just a single entry point. So the entry team had just made that breach, and I think at least one or two guys had committed into the front room to take that front room, start that process when we took shots through a window at other members of the team, actually myself. And so that was an abort. And I don't want to use the word as abort as in we shut everything down, but it was a change in tactics. So it got shut down as far as penetrating the structure and owning the structure from the inside to backing out, using other tactics, doing the barricade tactics, and then progressively applying those levels of force and then owning the structure from there.
You mind if I throw in 2 cents on this, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good. The one thing, because Commander's he is a humble guy and he won't do this, I'm going to toot his horn for him.
Please do.
One of the things that came out of this that was obvious, and I didn't understand it until later on, but 2 things are extremely contagious under stress. One of them is panic, and the other one's composure. There is no better example, in my opinion, of both levels of supervision. One panicked, one was composed. Scott called for suppression fire on the Alpha 3 window, which is the window right next to the front door, executed that, went up, evac'd Terry, and Joe Chatham did a phenomenal job. He did, but had it not been for Scott and then pressing that threat, knocking down the threat and evac'ing Terry, it could have been a lot uglier. So I'm going to sing your praises on that because you deserve it, and that's the only reason. But it's in true fashion back then. If there was something that was questionable or dicey, the department had the reputation of, or had the habit of throwing medals at it. We're going to cover it up with medals. You guys were all heroic. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't that way.
Yeah, I think if we look at any incident, even going back to the more current ones from 2016, and see something similar. We've all seen that.
Yep.
I went to that award ceremony and saw.
So if I can reflect on that just a little bit. As far as that incident goes, it changed a lot in the way we did warrants in the future. At that point in time, we went down to 3010 Arizona without a full bag of equipment. We didn't have our gas mask because we didn't use gas on warrant entries. The briefing intelligence prior to the warrant is we would have a briefing interview with the narcotic officer who went in and made the buy and who could provide us with the information, the pertinent information regarding the suspects inside and the operation, this, that, and the other. No, if they could provide us with a floor plan, they did, and if they didn't have a floor plan, your best guess. From that, going forward from that, we always thereafter went into a warrant with a full bag of equipment, gas mask, chemicals, all of the full complement. Number two is we did a drive-by and a video drive-by, and from the structure, from the outside analysis of the structure of the place, we developed floor plans. And you can do that very easily. Just think a little bit about it.
Yeah, just looking at the outside of the structure, noticing where vents are,
exactly,
how the windows are laid out.
Exactly.
Common construction for homes these days.
Yes.
Tactical diagramming, it's called.
Yep.
Because
Yes.
anything you put tactical in front of it makes it really cool.
It's much cooler.
So that became part of the training program, as to how to analyze a structure and develop a floor plan from those things you just
That's
mentioned.
very interesting you bring this up, because it's nice to know where it started. Because when I came on, the culture was, I don't want to give away too many details, but there's very much involved in the drive-bys now, more than just a drive-by video and some pictures. It's the intel is much more where we do as much as we can on the front end, and then the culture's always been, since I've been on that, yes, you definitely bring all your equipment for that call out, because
Yes.
not only could it end up like last week where we pull out and now it's a barricade person, but there have been times we get called out while we're still running the first warrant, and then we go directly to a second location.
Absolutely, yes.
Yep, absolutely.
See, that's why I wanted to have this history lesson here for Dallas SWAT. Commander, you hired on in 1968, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, your son told me that too. The birth of Dallas SWAT is 1968, right? December of 1968 is when it started.
Actually, it was a little before December.
Okay.
Yeah. They started configuring about mid-year, configuring the 5 units, A, B, C, D, and E units. They were taking recruits right out of the academy into SWAT.
What could go wrong?
Into Dallas Tactical. Yeah, because they hadn't been infiltrated with bad ideas. But that's beside the point.
We learn from our history of bad ideas, right?
Sometimes.
You hope.
Sometimes.
Well, in 68, I would imagine the country, all major departments, which Dallas has always been a major department, is modeling their units after what was going on the West Coast.
Correct.
Okay. And we finally got to the point, it's been romanticized through TV shows. Hell, we even had our own Dallas SWAT show here. We're not going to mention.
No.
But I want to give a quick shout out to somebody we're missing before I get into the birth of Dallas SWAT. She is a hero, a legend on Dallas PD, still active. Detective Misty Van Kuren. She couldn't make it today. She spent a decade in Dallas SWAT, and she is one of the toughest, hardest working people I have ever met. And she is definitely missed today to be a part of this.
She would bring a lot of class to this group today.
Yeah, she'd bring some intelligence too.
That too.
Yeah. So 1968, the birth of SWAT, but it wasn't called SWAT. It was Tactical Unit. Can you talk about whenever that unit was presented? And then there's also an incident in the Lancaster barricade that I want y'all to talk about. Whenever that tactical unit was formed, how big it was and how it was received, because it was tactical unit, but it was actually wink wink SWAT, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
And before the actual development of the 5 units of tactical, there was a crusty old lieutenant named Holloway. And he had assembled. I see some nods around the table. His name lives on today, but he had assembled a group of proven operators, people who had a reputation and a history of being able to handle themselves.
Were they called Raiders? Was that the
Holloway's
nickname?
Raiders? Yeah, and they would handle the high risk stuff up until the time that Dallas Tactical was fully formulated.
A lot of robberies.
A lot of robberies, a lot of stakeouts, shotgun stakeouts in your stop and robs. in December, and it always cranked up around the end of the year, November through the end of the year, because it was shopping time for the bandits, to go in and pull robberies. And so they would place armed officers in businesses, stop and rob, 7-Elevens and that kind of stuff, for the specific purpose of foiling armed robberies. So up until December of '68, when Floyd Knight was sitting in a store, and suspect came in to rob the store, and apparently Floyd had made a restroom visit, and when he came out of the restroom, the hijacker had to. Anyway, Floyd was killed in that thing. Al was killed in that thing. And that was in December of '68. So thereafter, we still did for a number of years did shotgun stakeouts in businesses at that time of the year. So you've got a bunch of people from the academy and other venues coming into Dallas Tactical doing shotgun stakeouts. But like you started out and you mentioned the Symbionese Liberation Army and the Black Panthers and the anti-war protest and all of that was going on at that point in time. Crowd control was the main emphasis. The State Fair of Texas, the last high school Friday night, and the crowds and the violence that always came with high school night at the State Fair of Texas. So
nothing changes.
Some things remain the same. But the tactics were a little bit different. Today, it seems like our operators are handcuffed. Back then, we had a lot more community support, throughout the community for maintaining law and order, and the tactics were a little more energetic, shall we say. And there was a riot at White Rock Lake on a Sunday afternoon in
1977.
1977, and that evolved. Some officers tried to. On the east side of White Rock Lake, there was what they called a yacht club and a bathhouse, a swimming place, and that was a Sunday afternoon collection point, assembly point for all of the war protesters and all the other little punkies. Some officers tried to make an arrest, and then the crowd gathered, and it evolved into a citywide assist officer. If you can go, go, and so there was a lot of response to that, and the response that it took a while to gain control of the situation, given with the manpower we had at that point in time. So basically, SWAT, until some of these other things came to pass, kind of starting with the Lancaster deal. Dallas SWAT was oriented toward crowd control to a large degree. And as the war ended the Vietnam War ended in 74, 75, and so the mission of Dallas SWAT, Dallas Tactical, became a little more special events oriented.
Can you explain to the listener why it was called Dallas Tactical as opposed to Dallas SWAT at the time?
All of the activities that occurred out on the West Coast in L.A. and other venues on the West Coast, there was a TV series called SWAT, L.A. SWAT, and that was very popular. And then there was a movie called SWAT, and that was a pretty good movie. But the powers that be in Dallas didn't want Dallas to be recognized in that light. I think they preferred a kinder, gentler image. So it was tactical. And that Dallas Tactical, they refused to recognize the SWAT label until we went to the international SWAT competition in Orlando, and all of the SWAT teams from all over the country were called SWAT. And we evolved the first year we were down there, we registered as Dallas Tactical. And after that, we said, that's bullshit. We're going to be Dallas SWAT.
What year was that?
1992 was our first year. 93 was our first year.
Okay, because when I came on, it's officially Dallas SWAT, but still the entire department still called it TAC.
Yeah. What year was that?
I came on in 2006.
Okay.
Matt, was it still tactical whenever you got on?
No.
Okay.
No, when I came to SWAT in 05, it was already called SWAT, but there were still many guys, senior guys that's still there that had the tactical rocker on their BDUs.
It actually looked cool.
Yeah, and so,
really
but
cool.
it was. I mean, I never even thought about it, the tactical versus SWAT, because when I came on in '99, I think it was still called tactical at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came to SWAT, I just didn't understand the difference in the names, the verbiage of it. When I came over, I realized that was a big deal. Like, people's like, hey, we worked to get this SWAT thing done.
Yeah.
And so
It was a hard sell.
and I'm sure,
I'm telling you.
and after being here for as long as I have now, I realize that's probably was because they don't want to change anything. But at the same time, since I've been here in 2005, it's always been SWAT. But, there was many guys that had that, for years still had the tactical rocker on their BDUs.
No, I
but
remember.
it was older stuff. Yeah.
It was actually really cool. It looks really cool. I want to get a picture of one of those tactical rockers whenever we release this episode for the post.
Scott's got one under his
good.
shirt right now.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
He's wearing
I got it sewed on my
Well,
T-shirt
he's-
right here.
Well, he's dressed in this general outfit here. Like he came in dressed like the commander.
He's
he's
dressed like the commander,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, he's
He always
damn-
does.
He's got both sides of the shirt are full of medals.
You're
mi-
full of shit.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, here,
Okay.
Hey, the listeners know I'm full of shit. I promise you.
I tell you, Joe, the thing that the whole tactical SWAT thing reveals is the same problems that we had when we were trying to get sub guns, when we went to the MP5s.
Mm-hmm.
And they had just gone to them just before I got out of there. And the way they sold it was because you can't have machine guns because you'll kill everybody in the neighborhood. And so it got sold by saying these are select fire weapons. And they're going, okay, you can have those, but no machine guns. Like, okay, fools. So it was the same thing with going to SWAT. Is it had the public perception is what they were worried about always, which just drove me crazy. And so by selling it as more professional, we're professional guys. We take guys, train them well, equip them well, which we weren't back then. But it was able to be more palatable to those in power. We did not do ourselves any favor by perception and educating people on what we truly did. We actually brought a bunch of chiefs and some city council out to the range to show them capabilities. Okay, our snipers can hit quarters at 200 yards, and so they were like, oh, that's kind of neat. Did the same thing with the explosive breaching package, bringing people out there to show them how surgical that was. Otherwise, they were ignorant. The armored vehicles weren't for running people over and smashing into houses. They were for rescuing people, providing hard cover in front of a location. That education, we kind of failed at that in the early years of not getting people sold on the true reasons behind it.
Well, that's because y'all have a task to do. You care about the mission and care about in completing the task as safe as possible. You don't care about all the fluff, the window dressing that everybody else cares about. You have a job to do. You're the one sitting there in the line of fire. Y'all have to deal with this. Y'all actually have to use this weaponry in these vehicles and also evolve your tactics from some cases tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Y'all are the ones going through this, not somebody that's sitting there watching it on the news and forming an opinion.
Yep.
Going from shotgun squad to tactical, right? You mentioned an incident happened, Lancaster Barricade. Can y'all talk about that?
Just a word before we get
Okay.
specifically to Lancaster. In the early days, our equipment issue was a 36-inch wooden baton
Yeah.
for crowd control, a military surplus flak vest, which wasn't bulletproof. We didn't have an armored personnel carrier, which will come to light at Lancaster. The equipment we had was military hand-me-downs. The first .223 caliber rifles that were issued to the sergeants of the 20 squads that was then the tactical unit. And we can't put those in the hands of these troopers, these officers. It's got to be, you got to have a sergeant control that weapon because,
Can't be trusted.
Yeah. So in the beginning, that's what we had to work with. And you look at what is in the arsenal, the bag of tricks, the repertoire of today's SWAT. It's phenomenal. But
Yeah, Matt and Danny are going to get into that, what they got in their bag of tricks
Okay.
now compared to what was.
Where's your bag of tricks? Because I'd like to see it
Yeah.
and maybe play with it.
Yeah.
borrow it.
It's a family show, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I can put the explicit tag on it. Don't worry.
Yeah, nice.
But moving along to the Lancaster incident that you just need.
I don't know nothing about this. I'm curious about this.
In April of 1991, this place, there used to be an old, well-known hero, iconic baseball player named Dizzy Dean, who was a broadcaster. This was once his estate. It's kind of out in the country and down in Lancaster. Well, there's a squatter that set up residence in that house, that ranch house, and the owner showed up, and this guy ran the owner off with gunfire. So he calls Lancaster PD, and 2 Lancaster PD officers drive up out front. And if anybody wants a picture of that site, I have it. The 2 Lancaster officers, detectives, show up, and they come under fire. Okay.
Rifle fire.
Rifle fire, yeah, from a vent in the attic that overlooked the circular drive out front. So they're pinned down, and they get on the hook and ask for Dallas SWAT assistance, Dallas Tactical. I'm going to call it like it is, Dallas SWAT assistance. Yes. So at that point in time, SWAT had been reduced to 2 units, A unit and E unit. Why A and why E? Because about 1975-ish, when the Vietnam War ended, SWAT was reduced to 2 units, and they asked us, we're going to put 3 of the units out in patrol as response teams to high crime areas. Do you all want to retain your A and E designation, or do you want to change it to A and B? And we all said, no, we want to be A unit, and we want to stay E unit. So that's how you get to A and E nowadays.
Kept the bookends, A and then the E. How many guys on each unit then?
At that time, it was 4 squads in each unit. So we had 8 squads, 9 people, a sergeant and 9.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't you wish?
Where are you
Don't
guys
you
at
wish?
now?
Where are we at, Matt?
Operational, we're under 30.
Yeah, I think we're slotted for 40, so 4 squads.
40 is a good number.
Yeah,
Well,
we can
that's
get
4 sergeants and 36 operators.
But then you can't have anyone injured. You can't have anyone off on vacation.
No one
you can't
ill.
have any other
Yeah,
special assignment or
yeah.
anything going like this going on. Yeah.
But see, Houston runs with 25, being as big a city as they are. But they've got support teams that are guys that used to be on the team or part of their rifle teams.
Yeah, kind of like LA with the whole Metro.
Yeah. So they've got a bigger pool than what Dallas has right now. So you guys, it's getting that done with what you guys do with that. A number is tough.
We're as small as we ever has been.
When you look at the original Dallas Tactical, over 120 officers, and now you're down to 30. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And today's environment is much more violent.
Yeah, we don't even have 30 operational officers right now because you have 5 brand new guys who just got here last week. You have people that are out injured, and you have people that are non-operational for other reasons. So we're under 30 right now, and we have been for quite some time.
How many guys would you say are on the team that have had 4 or 5 years on the team or less?
Probably either a third or almost half.
Oh, God.
So maybe 5 guys on the team who have been on over 5 years, or over 10 years.
I would say I would say if you set the number at 8, you have over half of the division under 8 years of experience in SWAT.
What do you guys do when you get simultaneous operation BPs, hostage situations? What do you do when you get that?
You handle the one that you're at first, or the pressing one,
and everybody else hang on.
And yes, sir. And you try to, and this didn't happen that often, obviously, but you divide up your resources and send a small contingent over to the second location, and hopefully, again, you determine the priority of them. What's going on? What's the status of that operation? You send them over there just to kind of hold the fort down, if you will, until you can reallocate people from the first location to the second one. We've done it. We just did that on a warrant for a couple of months ago, where we had 2 locations we had to hit. We had to put a small footprint of officers at the second location in the Grove while we hit the one in Oak Cliff, and then we transition people over if we needed to.
But okay, in light of that though, and I know you guys do this, which is phenomenal. You accelerate your training. You do a lot more training than what we used to do back in the old days.
We try.
And you've got a good complement of armor that you can put around places, just kind of minimize guys' exposure. So
Sure. Well, that's one of the things that I was telling Joe about this whole thing. That when I came over, the 2 APCs we had didn't even run.
Yeah.
There was those old peacekeepers, and we just never used them. We just hid in the streets behind whatever's in the streets. And now we have one that's down, but when we're at fully staffed, we can have 5 pieces of legitimate APC armor to put on places with drones, and that can somehow, it helps you with that. But it still doesn't replace bodies. It can help you, but it doesn't solve all your problems.
those armored vehicles probably would have run better, but somebody in the room got us T-boned one time rolling up to a hit.
Oh, the old ones?
Yeah. Somebody here got us T-boned, and his response was, get out and run. So we ran down 3 blocks and hit it.
Well,
It wasn't me.
Well, we've got some that are high centered or stuck sometimes and had to bail off.
They were embarrassing. They were embarrassing.
That is without a doubt one of the best things. Because it's not like you can say, APCs. Obviously, you need those. I mean, it goes without saying. It's an understatement. But when you've worked without them, when we didn't have any, the 2 that we had when I came over didn't run, and now we have. And now if we're down to 3, we're all like, wow, we don't, because you become spoiled with them because they're great things to have.
Danny, how many armored vehicles did you guys have when you got there?
Yeah, we had 3. We primarily used the new one. We had the 2 older ones. And,
What's old?
The 2 that we got when you were here.
Yeah.
Oh, you still don't have
Still
them.
have
no,
them. Oh, yeah.
They were older.
No.
Sorry.
No, they came over in 2005, the year I came over. We still have them.
No, we had some that were older than that.
No, I knew. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't have those. Those aren't in the
No,
museum
we
somewhere?
don't have those.
Oh.
But the old peacekeepers that we had when I first came over
Yeah.
that never ran, we had those for months. And then finally, I don't know, I've been here for several months, and we, I guess whatever long it was. And then we finally got the 2 new ones in, which to these guys are the old 2 ones, which are the oldest ones, which are the smaller ones. But those were the big ones and the nice ones when we first got them.
There's 2 that were older.
Oh, no, I remember those. Yeah, I remember those.
And what's funny is the last 2 ones we got was in 2020, right in the middle of the defund the police. So all of a sudden these 2 things showed up. And it's because it was a year and a half in the making with the federal paperwork, but ironic.
Bearcats?
Yep.
Both of them?
Yep.
Yeah.
They both showed up like the month before the riots. And they really weren't they weren't even outfitted with radios or anything. It was like, hey, we got to put them in service because we need them.
What capabilities do they have, just to get off on a tangent? Or do we need to not talk about this?
Well, no, we can talk about it, and I'll just kind of answer your question briefly, but then I feel bad. I think we got off topic. Commander was on Lancaster.
We're going back.
We'll go back.
This is a memory test for Scott.
So I think some of the stuff you're probably aware of, it has the turret, the protection. Now they have what we call the boom on the front, so it's an arm. It has a gas injector on it as well, so we can push that through. The new ones have the windshield has a protection guard that folds down, so for riots and everything else. So if it the undersides on one of them is heavily armored. It's made for overseas for IEDs.
Yeah, the green one has a filtration system on it because it's made for sea burning. And stuff
That's
like
what I was going to ask
Aspen,
about. Some of the
WMB.
newer ones have that. It's incredible.
Yep.
That would have come up handy, real handy, on Lancaster and the other one at Walcott, because we had to.
Beautiful segue. Keep going.
Nice. It was good. It was seamless.
Great segue
Oh,
back
yeah,
to let's get back on.
Let's
Let's get the
Lancaster.
APC back on the Lancaster.
Back to April of '91. So Lancaster PD calls at 11:30 a.m. calls Dallas PD for a SWAT attack response, and first units arrived out there on location at noon, about 12 noon, and E unit was primary, and this guy is in the house and he's ready to fire. He's ready to bring on the firefight, whatever it takes. They surround the location and they start.
He's got 2 officers pinned down.
Yeah.
Still.
No, that's on Walcott.
It's Lancaster. It's
Yeah,
Lancaster.
the 2 Lancaster detectives.
Mm-hmm.
They're
That
still
initially
paid.
responded.
Yeah, but we didn't have an APC.
Okay.
Okay, so those guys are hung out kind of down there sunbathing in the heat.
Yeah.
As time rolls on, they shot a bunch of gas into the house, thinking this might bring the guy out, and instead it drove him up into the attic. And we had opened up so many windows and ports in that house, and with the strong wind out of the south, it was ventilating the gas through the house so fast that it really didn't get up to the attic. At 1 o'clock, we requested an APC from the Texas National Guard, and to get that had to go through the governor's office and all the way back, and it took 3 hours to get an APC authorized. Yeah, that's incredible. And in the meantime, we're out there trying to gas this guy and trying to evac the pinned down Lancaster detectives, and things went on. So about at 3:30, the Lancaster officers were extracted, and they were debriefed for any intel they might be able to provide. At 4:47, entry was initiated through the front door. I didn't fully hear that.
I said that's why he's the commander.
Yeah.
It's times, specific
So
times.
they initiated an entry through the front door, and the structure of the house was such that if you go through the front door, there's a hallway to the right, a room directly in front of the front door, and some more part of the house back to the left of the front door. And Officer Gary Smith was lead operator. He breached the door, and he went across the hallway and posted on the wall directly across from the door, and the suspect tracked him across the hallway and shot him through the wall.
Where was he hit?
He
Chest
was,
and upper chest and then out the back.
this guy is using a 30-30 rifle.
It lodged in his back plate of his vest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we got an officer down. Okay. Doug Kowalski should have been an operator for years before he got to be a commander, the command position, because he liked to get in with the action. The lieutenant and Sergeant Denemy and Doug were on the entry team. Well, now they have to do a downed officer evac, so they pulled that off and got Gary Smith out of there. And at that point, that late in the afternoon, they called for A Unit to come out and relieve E Unit, because E Unit was pretty spent by then. So A Unit showed up at 5 o'clock out there, and we were in the process of swapping off perimeter positions and doing a relief. You talk about communications in an incident and how important they are. At 6:30, the green light, air quotes, the green light was commanded to the perimeter teams. At 6:47, the suspect.
Explain green light, Scott, for people that don't know.
We're going.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take a break and deviate here. And green light was a term that was never used before this incident, in my opinion, in the Dallas Police Department. Seen it on television and in the movies, and people had talked about it, but that green light command was given to the perimeter positions. Nobody on the perimeter questioned, what do you mean, green light? There was no question of that command. Okay? So later on, and we'll get to this in the debrief, it became a big question, especially administratively, higher up. What are you doing issuing a command that nobody's ever been briefed on before? It's not in our tactical manual, anything like that.
But basically, a green light is take out the subject and next target of opportunity.
At the earliest opportunity.
Regardless.
You see him, you take him out. And that was not questioned. In the post-event conversations, that was heavily questioned. Well, what do you want to use? Do you want to use plain voice? Okay. You perimeter positions or you use precision rifle positions, shoot the suspect the next opportunity. Well, that doesn't sound real good on TV. So it was kicked around back and forth about what effective communication can we come up with that authorizes our perimeter position, our precision rifle position, to eliminate the threat. And so we came up and agreed upon, and I'm guessing it's still used today because I don't know, the code that is now used, and I don't want to use that code. And if y'all keep one of the best kept secrets for years and years with Dallas SWAT, with Dallas PD, was BFR. BFR. And for the longest time, we'd deliver a BFR at such and such window or whatever, and the news media would always come up to guys and say, "Hey, what's a BFR?" And for years it stood as a secret, and finally somebody broke down and told them it was a big rock, a BFR. And
Big
I don't know,
rock.
Big effing rock.
Yeah, big effing rock. Did you still use BFR?
Yes, sir.
And it's fun. It's still breaking glass
still
with
works.
rocks.
So the suspect. Anyway, cleaning this up. The suspect crawls out of the back door. Out of the back door on his belly crawling with his 30-30, and somebody came on the radio and said he's on the ground. Traditionally, somebody comes up and says he's on the ground. It means he's running. Okay, and given that, we had the helicopter at the command post. And I had Curtis Fortner, my trusty assistant squad leader, standing there with his M16. I said, "Curtis, get on the helicopter. Do not let this guy get away." And they took off. Well, in that intervening, that period of time, two precision rifle positions fired on this guy and missed.
Why'd they miss?
And missed. Go ahead, Steve.
Let me segue on this. Tall grass, guy's on his belly crawling. They don't have a good visual of him. They're both perpendicular to the target, and farthest shot was 55 yards out. Oh, it gets better.
And a third perimeter officer with an open sight M16 pops the guy.
Say who it is.
Goslin?
Goose Coslin.
Goose Coslin, the old crusty goose.
A man among men.
Indeed. So they call shots fired, and they say the suspect's down. My squad was a primary response team, and we got up there, and this guy was still on his elbows with his head down on the butt stock of his 30-30 DRT. Didn't even drop anything. We weren't, when we went up there on him, we weren't sure that he was in such a position that we weren't sure he was dead, but he was, and that concluded the thing. But there were some. Go ahead.
Headshot, 75 yards, standing position. Pretty impressive.
Start to finish, 8.5 hours. E unit came in. They had breakfast. They worked out, and they got called to this call out. It's hot. It's a hot Texas day, and they were out there the better part of the day. And people who will argue about physical fitness and the virtues of it, the necessity of it, and it will come out again in the Cowboys victory parade, the physical fitness element to SWAT operations. It's indispensable. So that's the way Lancaster ended. There were a lot of facts that came out in the critiques. No APC. And what do we use? We have to borrow one and wait 4 hours. About command and control, what happens when command is OBE, overcome by events, because he's part of the operation and not in a command position to oversee the operation and issue instructions about how to handle it. So, I can't fault the person's, I can't fault Doug's desire to be in the action. Mm-hmm. But as a command person, that's not the appropriate place to be, because you can become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. So
objectivity.
What was learned from that? Did y'all get the APC after that incident?
No. In fact, first I want to go back. OBE, what was that again?
Overcome by events. The fog of war, Steve.
I got chills. I got chills.
You got chills?
Yes,
you got chills.
And a little erect.
That actually might be in the description of the episode.
Take a deep breath.
Oh, yeah, no. You're the breathing guy. No, in fact, we didn't get an armored vehicle after that, because in a subsequent operation in 93, there was a suspect that was off his meds, tried to kill his mom. He lived at home. That's an indicator, because he was mid-20s. She ran out of the house, called the coppers. Coppers show up. He's got him pinned down with handgun fire. So, of course, we don't have an armored vehicle at that point, so we borrowed one from, I think it was one of the armored car companies.
Lomas armored cars.
Okay.
No.
They showed up. Little did we know until we found out later that not all armored vehicles are fully armored.
They are not.
They are not. And we found out the one they gave us was not fully armored until after it was over. So first operation, obviously we had a REACT team went and snatched them out with the armored vehicle. And Doug was on that armored vehicle too, because he just likes it, being on the sharp end. But so that was our first thing. We're like, oh, we got to do something about this. That was probably the biggest thing that came out of that. Richard Garcia was my sergeant at the time, and typical deal, got everything surrounded, doing negotiations, throw a gas package in there. I don't think we've ever, up to that point, had never used as much gas as we used on that. It looked like the house was on fire. We actually went to burning gas that you put them inside of an ammo can, punch some holes, which we did right then, and throw that in there because it keeps the place from burning, but it kicks out a lot more gas, handheld gas. So, the place looked like it was on fire. Do you want to plug anything in yet?
My squad was out at the range doing training on that day. It's September 2nd, and the temperature was over 100 degrees. It was very hot. And so we ran, the call came out, officers pinned down, and we ran code 3 from the range over to Walcott, which is out south of the Veterans Hospital, down south of town. We got there, and the officers were pinned down in front of the structure, and we used smoke canisters to create a screen so we could extract the officers. We used the borrowed armor car to extract one officer, and we went up from the AD Alpha Delta side and pulled the other one out under cover of smoke. This talk about command and control and stuff. We had a new chief over tactical, over SWAT, and this guy was he was proud to be commander of SWAT. And so at noon, he gets on the 12 o'clock noon broadcast live, and he tells everybody that we're going to handle this situation just like we do all barricade situations. We're going to negotiate, and if the negotiations prove to be not fruitful, then we'll put gas chemical agents in there to try to soften him up and get him to come out. And if that doesn't work, we'll have to go in and we'll have to assault and take the suspect in custody. Well, as time passed, you know what we did? We did just exactly what the chief said we would do. Now, the one catch to this is because of the heat, power was still on in the house because he opted not to cut power in the grid because it was too hot. And when you go through school, you look at the priority of life. Mm-hmm. In hostage situations, it's the hostage first, innocent civilian second, and your officers come third. Well, okay, there's no hostages in this deal, okay? So what in your priorities, are you more worried about the heat and its effect on the civilians? What exactly are you concerned about? Because as things unfolded, this came to a head. The suspect having power on was able to watch the news, and that's the only way he would know that Sergeant Richard Garcia and his squad was posted up on the blind side of the garage awaiting to make an assault on that place. And when the suspect came out, he opened fire on them. That's the only way he would have known that they were there.
Let me cut in here real quick.
Sure.
So Richard was a good sergeant. He actually pulled us out of the heat for a while, and usually you get acquiesced, you have to give it to somebody else. We've been out there for a long time, but it was probably not a good decision to send us since we've been out in the elements that long, but I'm not going to argue it because I like doing that stuff. But anyway, so one of the lessons we learned off some of the other stuff is, especially Arizona, was expected entry points. We didn't want to go through the front door because that's where they expect you to come through. So we're going to go through the back door. And instead of doing multiple breach points and all that stuff, we just decided we were going to do a stealth probe to contact and see if we couldn't get him that way. But anyway, so the guy comes out on the front porch. He's got a rag over his mouth. And we're like, okay, perimeter's like, he's at the front door. So we're like, okay, so now we're going to go in the back door. We're going to shift and become an arrest team and take him down the front. And the guy shakes the rag off. He's got a gun underneath it, shoots behind him, off to his right flank, goes through the garage door, through the garage wall, past about 3 officers, and hits Richard Garcia in the thigh and drops him. So unluckiest man on the face of the earth. There's a good Super Bowl story about him too. But anyway, the guy takes off running across the street, takes a 308 round.
Down the driveway.
Yep. Takes a 308 round in the chest, a couple of 5.56 rounds, a couple 9mm rounds, and makes it to the neighbor's yard across the street. The guy was crazy. He didn't realize that he was supposed to die when he gets hit by gunfire. Made it all the way across there. I think another one of the issues that came up on that was we had new guys there that had not practiced tracking running targets, which is an art in of itself. So Scott was in charge of the MP5 program at that time, and that became part of our curriculum on that, is shooting moving targets. And for good reasons. We figured out through an after action that that's one of the things we need to work on, which is what after actions are for, and got a lot better at that. But yeah, there were some sobering things that happened on that hit, and just so much of it was just the intel prior. We gave up all the advantage we had. So
yeah, when I talked just a minute ago about command being part of the problem, Steve said we delivered gas, burning gas, hot gas, in a 5-gallon, maybe a 10-gallon can up to the front door. Well, we used the APC to get it up there. Well, the APC pulled down the driveway and made a left onto the street and stopped in front of the house. In that armored car was a sergeant, and Doug's there too, because he won't, God bless him, he's got it. He loves to have his hand in it, and they, parking there in front of the house, blocked a shot by one of the precision rifles in a house across the street. Instead of being part of the solution, you become part of the problem. And the suspect came out the front door and made a right to his right, left to the looking at the house, and down the driveway, and he's taking away, as he comes down the driveway, taking away the cover of the armored car parked there, as well as the armored car blocking some of the shots by perimeter elements. When he did that, when he came out, things really just kind of turned to shit. Fire discipline really sucked. We had guys tracking the suspect down the driveway and ripping off rounds, and I think killed 3 squad cars and 1 civilian car, and luckily went into a house and didn't hurt anybody. And we had 360-degree coverage around that location, so there were officers positioned all the way around it, and everybody was in harm's way with friendly fire. So, and in fact, initially, we were concerned that Sergeant Garcia had been hit by friendly fire until ballistics proved that the suspect, knowing they were there, happened to land a lucky round.
Well, and that was another one of the things that came out of it too, was establishing fields of fire. So basically you said, okay, each guy on the perimeter would designate, I've got from A to B, and then somebody take from B to C, so you just have those overlapping fields of fire. And the other thing that came out of that was we had no tactical medical plan. For an ambulance to get up there, they would not go into the hot zone, so we would have to evac anybody to them. And so that became one of those things, too, that we needed to work on and start working our own medical packages on site until we got tactical medics, which was a life changer, too.
Oh, huge step. And we learned the essence of the SWAT medic program at our competitions in Orlando. Yeah. Those people down there are very progressive, and they had established a SWAT medic program that was just A1, and we finally got the ball rolling in Dallas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it's evolution, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've talked about some critical incidents that have trained tactics, have trained the weaponry and the protective gear that y'all have had, and you showed a reason to have armor. We're going to get into some other critical incidents that was kind of called an anatomy of disaster, and you learn from. And one of them is a very high-profile parade the city of Dallas had here, and it went to total shit. But we've learned a lot, because the following year, that's back when the Cowboys were actually good, we were back in the same role, and it was pulled off masterfully. Okay? We're going to get into the evolution of weapons, and also we're going to talk about some rescue situations, some school shootings that have that have happened in the United States that we've learned from and we're still learning from. We're not going to rush it. So that being said, if any of the other listeners have heard some of the other episodes, they know what we're about to do. You're going to have to tune in for part 2 to hear the history and evolution of SWAT, part 2, to hear the rest of the story.